Good day, everybody. My name is Dana Massett with the Mindful Mama Podcast, Ascend Your Soul, and the Holistic Wellness Healing Center in Frankfort, Illinois. Today, I'm going to be talking about emotions. There's a lot of psychotherapists that believe that sitting in the emotion is very healing and powerful, and that you're supposed to sit in the emotion till the emotion completely releases. I have different beliefs on that. So my beliefs is that sitting in an emotion should have boundaries, so like structure, should be intentional and should be productive, because what happens when we sit in an emotion or replay an experience too many times, I call that over processing. And when we over process something, that heavy emotion, which is maybe grief, sadness, disappointment, frustration, you name it, maybe shame, maybe guilt, when you sit in that emotion too long, it can become a disorder. So, someone that maybe didn't have depression before, or a personality disorder, or a mood disorder, then begins to develop such because that emotion that they kept over processing or getting stuck in now has molded into their personality. And when something molds into your personality, and sometimes that's depression, victim mentality, or conflicting beliefs. And when you have conflicting beliefs, that can definitely create bipolar or personality disorder. Of course, it's more complex than that, but that's just a piece of it. So when we sit in an emotion, usually the ego is telling you to like solve the problem. You can solve the problem. So say a relationship came to an abrupt end. The ego wants to figure out how this happened to then protect you from it ever happening again, to then protect you from hurt. But the reality of the situation is when we're in relationship with someone, we are taking a risk. Love has a risk factor to it, and the other person has free will. So the other person could go through a midlife crisis and end the relationship and abandon the relationship. And that's not something you can really predict or prevent. Or maybe you got into a relationship with a narcissist and you really didn't realize you were with a narcissist, and then there's some abusive behavior and there's some gaslighting. So you can't rationalize an irrational moment. You can't rationalize irrational behavior. But that's what the ego is going to try to do. So it's going to keep pulling you back to the story, pulling you back to the emotion. And before you know it, 6 months have passed, a year has passed, and you're still processing, over processing, and in the loop. And now that has attached to your personality and identity. And maybe what has attached is victim mentality. Maybe it's depression. Maybe it's grief. You're just stuck in grief. And those emotions are sticky. They're very sticky. So now you're at the point where you possibly could be diagnosed with a mental illness disorder because you have over processed a situation or emotion. And maybe it's because you were trying to prevent yourself from this ever happening again. But the reality is, anything can happen. There's always an abyss of the unknown. Are you comfortable with the unknown? So, for example, if you got into a relationship with a narcissist, we can be tricked. The most intelligent people, educated people, can be tricked. What is a preventive factor that you can do for yourself to limit the exposure to getting into a relationship, or I guess limit the statistical percentage that you could end up in a relationship with a narcissist? One simple thing is slow down. Pay attention. Really take your time. So when the heart gets into a relationship, it kind of gets excited, right? So the heart gets excited, your heart's dancing with their heart, your wounds are attaching to their wounds. We're pulling each other in so tight, right? What if you slow down? Really, really slow down. So be excited and have fun, but with boundaries and safety. So be excited and then also have that voice to be like, I do not know this person. It's been a year. I do not know all the sides of this person. So to protect myself, because that's my job, I'm still taking it slow and I'm still paying attention. And maybe I'm just being a little suspicious or curious. Even though I love so many qualities about this person, I'm still going to be kind of pulling myself back to safely examine the other sides and really make sure I know all the sides of the person to a good degree. Now, when I talk about my belief is exploring emotions should be done with boundaries, intention, and be productive so we don't over process, is if you want to experience grief, maybe you should put a timer on your phone of 30 minutes to process and release grief. And maybe you're journaling through it. Maybe you have music on. But a big part of grief is working through the assumptions that we had about the person or situation. So assumptions we have about grief would be, oh, well, I assumed that this person was going to live till this age. That's an assumption. When someone is born, there is no timestamp on that person, or I'm sorry, like a warranty, a promise that that person is going to live to that age. We're not even promised a day. So working through our assumptions, which is kind of part of acceptance therapy, we have to be accountable and own our assumptions that we made that were maybe incorrect and that are maybe creating this extra attachment as well as resistance to acceptance. Because the sooner that we can accept the situation at hand, the sooner we can start living again. And that's definitely what that person that has passed away wants as well. So we work through our assumptions, and whatever this person was providing for us, how can we begin to provide this for ourselves? Or is there another figure in our life that can also be the provider of that? And that's a yes. And if you don't have people in your life to provide certain needs for you, it is also your job to go out and form those connections and invest in those relationships. If not, you can be the provider of that for yourself. So that's just to kind of dip into grief for a second of a healthy way to process it. That's just a small example. I will do a whole video on that, and I'm actually writing a book right now, Grief to Gratitude, that will dive in that even more. When you over process emotion, so people are like, well, you just have to sit in the emotion till it releases. That's not always the case. Sometimes reframing has to take place because the brain is going to get stuck in a loop. The brain loves to ruminate. The brain loves a story. So when you're sitting in the emotion, it's like the brain is like, I could just be here forever and add to this and create a new story and make the story longer. Like the brain loves it. So sometimes when we notice like, okay, I am over processing. This relationship ended a year ago and I'm still stuck in this loop. That is a good indication that some reframing needs to take place. Acceptance, kind of what I talked about with the grief scenario, absolutely, but some reframing. A choice for the brain to create a new story of acceptance and the beautiful gifts that the relationship gave to you, and then an intention of, I'm done with this story. I am done with this story. I'm closing the book and it's going on the shelf, or throw it out. Because what's happening is this experience is robbing you of the present moment. Every experience has lessons in it and blessings. So understand the gifts of the relationship, understand the lessons that are going to help you evolve as a human being. And then we need to put it back on the shelf, and we need to continue walking forward in our journey with intention. Again, if we keep picking this book up again, most likely you're just reading the same material and the same stories are playing over and over, which is robbing you from what's right in front of you. Namaste.